Hi everyone, this is Mindy Egan for Lawnfawn, and in today's card project, I'm going to create a scene using the Critters in the Desert stamp set, coordinating die, and the new color stencil. The first thing I'm going to do is take some 80-pound white cardstock, and I picked out the images from the stamp set that I want to use in my scene, and I'm going to stamp them in the Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. I plan on ink blending all my images, but I'm still going to use the jet black ink because it is a really great black ink and it's also fast drying. So once I stamp these down, I am going to leave my images in their exact place in my MISTI tool. There's a little trick that I like to do sometimes when it comes to using stencils and ink blending. So I'm just going to leave that there for now and then start working on my coloring. I will take a little bit of repositionable tape and place it on the back of my cardstock so that it sticks down to my work surface. There's also lots of great tools that you can use as well, but this I find to me takes up less space. Then I can start working on my coloring. So I started with this little critter in the center, and I'm going to use pizza crust, and I believe it is walnut ink to add a little shading to the side. I like using these mini blending brushes because I don't really have to mask off any areas of my stencil. The bristles are small enough where it really keeps me focused in the area that I need to on the stencil. I used peachy keen for the ears, and then for the turtle, I am just going to color in the head and legs and then the top of the shell. So I probably used cilantro. I can't remember exactly offhand, but I know I love using cilantro and artichoke ink. So I did use a little bit of cilantro on the turtle shell, but I also came in with a little bit of brown to kind of dirty him up a little bit so he blends in with the scene. I'm then going to move on to the second stencil, and I'm going to work on the cactus. So I used a little bit of the light brown for the sand at the bottom of the cactus. Once in a while, I'll bring in a blending brush that has maybe some orange or red leftover ink on it, just to kind of give it that reddish hue. And then I'll move back to my cilantro ink to color in my cactus. So I usually start with placing an all over color first as kind of my base layer. And then depending on the size of the image, I might just come in a little heavier handed towards the bottom of the cactus, or I can bring in a darker shade, which if I were to do that, I don't think I did it here, but if I were, I would probably use artichoke ink. For this smaller plant up here, I'm going to bring in a little bit of peachy keen. So I'm just putting a very light layer of this light pink on the very tips. And then I'm going to bring in a brighter green. I don't remember which one I grabbed, but it was more of like a brighter grass green. For the rock, I'm going to bring in a pumpkin spice. So I'm going to start out with this kind of darker orange and then bring in a darker brown. So that could be between walnut and dough. I think I grab walnut a lot. And these mini ink cubes are just so perfect for this because you don't need a ton of ink for these. Now for my snake, normally I think I go with like a brown or a green, but this time I brought in number 2 pencil and then a little bit of that dark brown again. And I love the snake in number 2 pencil. Now, because I have all that ink blending, I really want my black outline to stand out. So I'm bringing my cardstock panel back to my MISTI, tucking it in my bottom corner, just like I started out with. And I'm going to ink it up again in the jet black ink and stamp it down. And that just kind of brings that outline kind of to the front and center again. Definitely optional. I just really like to have that bold outline. I'll then line up the coordinating dies, hold them in place with Post-it tape, and run them through my die cut machine. I love how quick and easy these stencils are to color in my images, and I can still get in my shading. Now I can start working on my background or my scene for my critters. So I'm starting out with a piece of white cardstock that's cut to 4¼ by 5½. And just on the very bottom half of it, I'm going to be adding cilantro ink. So I'm just kind of starting out with this color. I have it fade off a little bit towards the center. And then I have the cactus border that I placed on there, and I ran that through my die cut machine. But I want to add a little bit more color to the bottom of the cactus. So I am actually going to flip over my panel here since it kind of stayed together for me. I flip it over and I am going to take a long piece of Post-it tape and place that over the die cut pieces so that it doesn't move around or come loose. And then I can bring that cilantro ink back in and add that darker color towards the bottom of the cactus. The bottom half of the panel, we're really not going to see. It's going to be covered up by a different piece. So I really just wanted to emphasize the shades in the cactus. Now for the other layer, which is going to be my sand to my desert, I have another piece of white cardstock cut to 4¼ by 5½, And I'm starting out with pizza crust ink. This one again, I'm going to blend about maybe halfway up, and this is a piece we are going to see. So I'm going to get that faded off towards the top. So it's always going to be lighter at the top of my area. And then I'll bring in a darker shade. For this, I'm going to be using dough, and this is going to go at the very bottom. So it blends into that lighter shade at the top. I'm going to bring in the cactus border and just line it up next to my sand that I have ink blended. And then I'm going to take that skinny strip or that long die, and this is going to cut this so it's going to fit right underneath my cactus. So once I have that lined up about even, I'm going to hold it down with Post-it tape, run it through my die cut machine, and that's going to cover up that bottom grass portion or that bottom green portion of my cactus piece. So here you'll see when I die cut it, it's going to fit right over the top there. So all you see is my cactus. For my desert sky, I really thought of coming in with some bright, vibrant colors, maybe a nighttime sky, but then I switched my train of thought. I don't very often do just a normal blue sky, so I brought in Forget Me Not. Now, it might look a little bit different of a shade than what Forget Me Not actually is because I like to just use my blending brushes throughout all of my inks. So that's why it might not quite look like it, but I love how that came out. Off screen, I die cut out letters that's going to say desert, and this is going to be part of my sentiment. I used the Kohl's ABC. I die cut them 3 times from white cardstock. So right now I'm gluing together 2 of the layers using my liquid glue. And then on the top layer that I'm going to have, I'm ink blending with pizza crust ink. So I'm coming in pretty heavy handed towards the bottom of the letter and then having it fade off towards the top. Then I'll once again use my tweezers and liquid glue, and I'm going to add these to the top of my other layer that I already completed. So it's going to be 3 layers of cardstock all together for each letter, and that's just going to pop it up for a dimension. Now I know once this ink dries back, it's not going to look like much, but I have something I like to add at the end that's going to really spice it up. So I used the lines on my grid mat to line up the word desert, and then I picked it up with a low tack tape. So then I set that off on the side. I need those letters all lined up and together because I need it for the front of my cardstock here to line up the rest of my sentiments. So I brought my panel over to my MISTI. I lined up the top sentiment and I'm trying to get everything centered. I really want to make sure that that smaller sentiment is even in margins on the right and left hand side. Once I'm comfortable with that, I just kind of remove everything and I can stamp this down. So the first one says, I will never. And then I will have the word dessert or desert you is what it's going to say. So I just kind of line that up again. I'm just lightly tacking that down to get an idea. Now, the last one here does say desert you or dessert you. I can't say it. Dessert you. I only want the word you. So I just kind of lined that up in between the S and the E because that's about center of my die cut word. I masked off that one word so I could only get or ink up the word you and stamped that down. I'll then take some liquid glue. I'm going to add it to the back of my letters, and then I'm just leaving everything in my MISTI right now since that cardstock is held down with the magnet. And then I can place this in that open area. So it was easier for me to stamp everything first and then come in and place that die cut word. And then I'll carefully peel back that tape, and I have a little bit of wiggle time if anything was crooked. Now I can start filling in my scene. So I'm just using a tape runner to add this cactus border to the bottom. So I line that up flush with the bottom of my card front. I'm not going to trim this panel down. Everything is going to be lined up with the edges. So the card size is going to end up being 4¼ by 5½. Now, once I have my cactus down, I'm adding my desert bottom there, that brown piece that I ink blended. And I can start filling in my scene with my critters. So I lined everything up first, but I do want to pop some of these elements up. So I started out by gluing my snake on top of my rock and then that extra cactus plant to the rock itself using liquid glue. And then I'm going to pop up this whole piece. So it almost kind of looks like one whole piece put together. And it was just easier for me to do it that way. A little bit is going to hang off the edge. I'll do that same thing with my turtle and that smaller cactus. I glued the turtle to the cactus, flipped it over, added some thin foam squares. So both the snake and the turtle pieces are with thin foam squares. And now I have this cute little guy that I added to the cactus as well. But this time I'm bringing in some regular foam squares. So these have a little bit more loft to them. It's going to pop up just a little bit more because this one is really in the foreground. And that one's going to complete the scene for this piece. And now I can work on that sentiment. So right now that looks pretty dull. It doesn't really pop out. But what I like to do is take some stickles and I kind of color over the letters. And it really just kind of brings a little pizzazz to the front of the card. I tried very hard to avoid using my most used stamp set, but I could not help myself. I had some extra clouds stamped and die cut already from all the clouds stamp set. So I added that to my scene. I'm coming in with a white gel pen and just adding some of those highlights to all of the critters and the cactus. And then all I need to do is add it to a top folding card base. So I love how that word came out with the sparkles. It does really help kind of bring that darker and lighter shade of ink to the front with those die cut letters. And that finishes off the card. So I hope you have tried these coloring stencils. They are so much fun and so easy to use. Thanks for joining me today.